I would be remiss if I didn't tell you what was going on in my life right now. Right now, I have been working on a course for private music teachers. I wish that I could have taken this course 10 years ago when I first started teaching music and becoming a full-time musician. It's really important that musicians and artists know how to run a business, how to do money stuff, how to find their ideal clients and ideal students. And that's what this course is all about. And if you're interested in it, you should just go to my website, emilyannpeterson.com, or you can simply go to barenakedbravery.com, which conveniently forwards to the same place. If this class is not something that you're interested in, which is totally fine, not everyone is a music teacher, I'm actually still game to create a class around what you want to learn. Anything in the wheelhouse of expression, bravery, vulnerability, creativity, entrepreneurship, songwriting, all of that is in my wheelhouse. So I would be happy to impart what I know to you based around exactly what you're trying to accomplish in your own bravery. I think it'd be really cool to make something together. So just give me a shout out. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. This is the place where we expose the threads of heroism that stitch together the stories we admire most. As a musician, singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and business owner, I encounter some really fascinating stories. Every episode you'll hear features a revealing conversation with someone who courageously pours themselves out into the world. We'll talk about fears befriended, the terrors battled, and the courage created along our stories of bravery, quiet heroism, and all-out gutsiness. We open the Pandora's box of the dream-crushing constraints we all face during significant moments of bravery. These moments of bare naked bravery are rarely censored in real life, so if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. The questions I ask today aren't scripted because I'm just curious. What is bravery? My hope for us all is that by listening to others search for and find their bravery, we will find our own. For that is what we need most, to know that we are not alone. The best way you can support the show is to share it with a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle's Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Bottom line, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. This week, I am vision casting for 2017, and I have got every layer of my life laid out around me. I do this twice a year usually, and I just vision cast for the entire year. I let myself dream big and cut myself free from hopefully I can cut myself free from a lot of the constraints that are like totally realistic. I let myself dream big and then I deal with the realistic elements of that. So I find that if I do vice versa, like if I do the realistic stuff first and then try to dream big, I just drag myself down. So all of that said, this week we're talking with Brittany Barbera, whose book is just really, quite honestly, just delightful and really powerful. She deals a lot with empathy, and this year for me, I am trying my best to include empathy at the top of my list. And I thought you'd really enjoy hearing what she has to say about it, about her book, and about how being weak is something that we all need. Brittany Barbera just to give you a little insight into who she is a Nashville-based singer-songwriter, and she's the #1 best-selling author of the book titled Let Me Be Weak, What People in Pain Wish They Could Tell You. She, like me, loves deep lyrics, power ballads, and weird people. And in 2013, she released her debut album titled The Sparrow, featuring some really great little songs that I like. In April 2016, Brittany released her new single called Let Me Be Weak, a song which eventually became the framework for her book. And when she's not singing or writing, you'll likely find her making a mess in the pottery studio. She's got some great pieces. Or talking to somebody into being her personal chef, which don't we all wish that? Or she's asking strangers too many personal questions. So I think she and I have a lot in common, which is perfect because we talk a lot about all of that today. Tell me about the song.
Well, the song is one of these things that, I don't know, as a writer, if you understand, sometimes you write something and it just kind of hits a nerve in you personally.
Yes.
And you don't really know what's there, but you just have this sense that there's something behind this. There's something here, like I just keep coming back to it. And so I started this song. It actually, in my very first co-write that I ever had when I moved to Nashville, I was writing a different song, and this phrase popped into my head about a song we were working on. And it didn't really fit that project, but I just kind of wrote that down. And off and on for about 4 years, I would go back to this and I'm like, what is this? Like something is important here. And I couldn't get it out. And I tried to get several different people to write with me to be like, maybe they'll figure out what it is. Maybe they're going to help me figure it out. And I kept getting like really a positive response when I would talk about some of the ideas behind that or what was going through my mind, but nobody could really like write it with me. So really mostly out of frustration, probably I started writing. I was like, I got to get this out. I'm going to have to just like sit here and really think about it. And I got, I don't know, maybe a big chunk of it out. I was actually just driving because I was like ruminating on this. And I'm like, what is this about? Like, what is this about? And so I'm like trying to like scribble on a pen at stoplights and get this out.
Did you have, at that stage, did you have the phrase, let me be weak in your mind?
Yeah, I did. That was basically all I had. And that was the phrase that just kind of kept turning over and over in me because I felt like, I mean, I guess from a lot of life experience, a lot of conversations I've had with people, I felt like that's really what people want to say sometimes when they're really having a rough moment. And nobody is brave enough to say it, you know, because we're going to get crazy looks. We're going to have lots of questions and we don't want any more of that. You know, we don't want the rejection that may come with it. But I just felt like there was something honest about that line. And so as a writer,
why do you think we need to say that?
Well, I think that for me, what resonates is that it says, let me be weak. That it's like, give me permission to not always be on my A game, to always be at 100%. Give me permission to like feel something that's happening. If it makes sense to feel it, like even if it's not a positive emotion or even if I'm struggling, I think where maybe like we get, I don't know, like afraid is that we think if we allow space for that means we're going to make that our identity. We're never going to get out of it. We're going to be known. But I just think if we just give ourselves a moment to be like, you know what, today's a rough one. And so for me, like I felt like as I was writing that, I just felt that it was honest. It's what people experience, but it's what we don't like to admit that we experience. So yeah, I just had been turning that phrase over for years in my head, trying to get a grip on what that meant to me.
So you're sitting at stoplights, scribbling things down, trying to write a song about this thing.
Yes. And then I really kind of had, after my stoplight sessions, I had a direction. I was like, oh, that's what this is saying. And I felt like really what it was not only for the person who might be experiencing these things. It was slightly angry, but not really, but just more like a frustration at like, stop trying to tell me how to feel or how to fix things, or how, like, I'm just being honest with my emotions right now. I'm being honest with what I'm going through. And that requires courage, especially when it's not pretty. And so the last thing people need when they're hurting or they're really, being vulnerable and revealing something that's a little risky, the last thing they need is your judgment, and I felt like as I had started writing that, and then again, eventually developing into the book, realizing there's so much to say on this topic, I just felt like, this is sort of in reaction to the way people respond when you do have courage or you do show up to just say how you're feeling.
Is the book written for people who are saying, let me be weak, or is it for those who are hearing someone else say, let me be weak?
Well, I went back and forth with that as well. Primarily, it is written to the supporters or to the people who are reacting to the people in their life who have gone through grief or any kind of emotional trauma. And it's to try and help them understand what it feels like to be a person in pain or the struggles they may be having, and to help them understand why some of the things that we do that we think are helpful really are not, and sometimes are even hurtful to the people. And you can be very well intentioned in that, but so it was mostly to really kind of educate those people. But as I had written it, I feel like it really would relate to anyone. And some of the reviews I've gotten or feedback I've gotten have been from people who they themselves are the people who are kind of going through a rough time or struggling with the way people are responding to them, and have felt just, I don't know, I think a sense of community, that they're not alone, and felt like, okay, somebody said what I want to say. And oddly enough, I think this is like, it's kind of funny, it's kind of sad that we have to do this, but I've had a couple of people who are in pain, and they're like, I'm giving this book to like my people because I'm sick of them. Like, I'm sick of this. And like, I don't have the capacity to really explain to them.
Well, I think
what's going on.
The whole nature of being in those dark moments where you feel really weak and really crummy about yourself, the last thing you want to do is try to explain to someone how you're actually feeling, because you don't have the strength to do it in the first place for yourself. Alone.
And one thing that I write about in the book that I think we overlook but is super important is that when we feel misunderstood, we feel emotionally unsafe. And so it shuts down communication. Yes. So often if you're going through stuff, and also we don't always have this level of clarity while we're going through something about why we feel the way we do or what it is. Sometimes we ourselves are figuring out, like, why am I so upset? Sometimes we have a very obvious loss, like a death or an illness, but we have many small little moments of grief or loss or just emotions throughout our lives that are not as obvious to spot, but obvious in their effect. Right. And so I think to put that on somebody who is struggling is, as you said, is just like one more thing that you're asking them to do, when just getting through the day can often be enough if you're in that space. So
what moments brought you to write this song?
I think it's been a collection of life experience, both my own personal experience and some of my very close friends, what I've witnessed them kind of walk through. So I've gone through a fair amount of trauma in my own life and in my family's lives. And then I felt like what I hadn't experienced personally, I just was watching people I love go through some horrific losses or betrayals or, I just feel like, you name it, whether it would be like abuse or drugs or incarceration or any number of things, job loss, just insecurity, weight loss, like any kind of issue I feel like is represented amongst people that I know fairly closely and have watched them walk through. And I started noticing a lot of those common themes, that it wasn't like, oh, I just feel this way when I'm hurting. It's that all these other people feel that way as well. And so when I went to write this song and eventually the book, that was one thing that kind of came up of just trying to figure out, well, what is it that I have to say? I got great advice from a songwriter years ago when I wrote my first song. It was the only person I knew who had been in the music industry, who had done this for a living. And he told me to listen to when people come and compliment you after a performance or after, say something about you, like ask a few more prying questions and specifically listen to what emotions they use to describe how you made them feel, or ask them like what it was that connected. If they just said they like it, be like, thank you. And like, can you tell me more about that? Like what specifically, and so it's a little awkward, but
someone told me that when I first started too. And that was a really great.
It's helpful. It's so helpful.
It's so helpful to say, instead of just saying, thank you. It like one takes the compliment one step further to say, thank you. What part spoke to you the most?
Right. And I think a lot of it is because it's all about connection. So not only from like an artistic perspective to know what resonates with people and that they're connecting, that this is sort of a more universal idea, not just a me idea. But when you start noticing patterns, and I think what those patterns help you do is recognize where you may be unique, what you may have to offer, or that you're saying in a slightly different way that people connect to, that someone else, isn't saying in the same way as you. And it helps kind of like, because I think sometimes when we have gifts, you would think that you would know that you have them, but by nature, sometimes you don't know that, because you think if it comes naturally to you, and even if it doesn't, like,
right,
you just assume everybody has that same level of ability to do all the same things as you do. And so sometimes it takes people really telling you that to learn, like, oh, not everybody thinks that way. Not everybody already knew that.
Right.
One of the things that would come up often for me is the word comfort. Like people would feel comfort in some way, whether it was a conversation with me, whether it was in, like a blog post or in a song. It was something that has repeatedly come up. And then I said a couple different times, a couple different people in my own personal life, I started to feel like I was the crisis hotline. And people would call me, like whenever anyone had a problem, they wanted to call and talk about it with me. And, and I felt grateful that I could help them out. But I mean, I'm not, a trained counselor. I've done a lot of informal counseling, but I'm not a psychologist. But for some reason, people found comfort or hope or perspective in talking with me, especially through some of these rough issues. And so all of those things kind of were coming together, and I was like, okay, maybe I really have something to say. Maybe this really is an issue that I knew it was neat. I mean, I knew for sure we needed to talk about it, because all of these private conversations, these things people would not admit in a public setting, people you would never believe would tell me, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding. Like, I can't believe, like, this really is an everybody everywhere issue.
Yeah.
So I knew that was going to resonate with people, and I knew that what I had to say was true. I don't know. It took a little while to really recognize that it wasn't common knowledge. And
one of the things that I always say about songwriting, or there's some songs that I've finished writing that I always say, like, it either proves that I need therapy or was the therapy.
Well, just as a side note, I mean, I got to say, like, shout out to my songwriters and, well, really writers of any kind. I feel like if there's a group that does this well, I think songwriters are it, because you can't write if you're not honest.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Literally just a couple weeks ago, actually, it might have even been last week, I went into a session and my coworker was like, how are you? And I was like, I don't know, it's an emotional day. And he was like, we can use this. And I'm like, we can. And we ended up writing a great song. But I think it's not a common for every vocation to do that. But as you said, for songwriters, like, it's kind of fun to have the freedom to explore that. And like you said, your own personal issues or just anything, like if your emotions, it's
true. There's been a couple of songs. There's one song in particular that I finished and thought, like, well, you start the song thinking about one specific
yeah,
and then you finish the song and realize, oh shit, this is my whole life. Every single relationship I've ever had has this pattern. Damn.
Yeah, you're like, oh, well, that was enlightening, wasn't it?
But I think that's something that your song, I mean, cussing aside, your song is really, that song, that message of let me be weak is really piercing in that sense, because everyone does have these moments where they just can't hold themselves up any longer.
Yeah. And in the book too, I know, like, I had a lot of resistance with those titles. as you can imagine, I mean, everybody, their whole life ambition is to be weak. You know, you can tell that's really something that everyone's loving. I mean, I just felt like I needed to say it. And so it has been somewhat polarizing. People either love or hate it.
You mean the title?
Yeah, the title, just the whole like, you know, it's just like, it's divisive. And
well,
I mean,
titling your book is a brave thing in and of itself.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I got a lot of resistance, and I understand really from like a marketing perspective too, because this is not, nobody really sets out and wants weakness in their life.
Oh yeah, nobody's searching on the Googs about weakness.
Yeah, and I get that, and I think, and at the end of the day, I mean, my book is not about remaining in a weak place or not going through your issues. I think what I say in the book is that, you know, I don't really think like weakness is an attribute, not an identity, just like strength. And so when we can kind of see it that way and see it more on a spectrum, that we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, and we all have seasons where we're one or the other or both at the same time in different areas, then it's not as scary of a thing, because I think we fear being defined as someone who is just like weak or helpless. And that may not in any way be the case, but you may need some tending to. You may be in a place where you're overwhelmed, and you're, you know, to not be able to admit that, or to at least to the people close to you, is really destructive for your own mental and emotional health and your progress for actually becoming stronger and growing healthier. And so I like to say there's a very distinct difference between acknowledging your emotion and wallowing in your emotion.
How would you separate those two?
Well, I think it can get a little tricky, especially when you're talking about grief or like a very big loss, because grief can linger and it comes back around. And I wouldn't say there's a specific timeline for anyone in grief. Like, we all have process it differently and in different times. But I think, you know, to acknowledge your emotion is really simply that. It's saying, it might even be like, I don't want to stay here forever, but this is where I'm at, you know, or to be willing to do work, or to be willing to work through it. And even that, like, I think we have to be gentle with ourselves if we are experiencing a big loss, because sometimes it takes a while to even get to that point. Like, you might start in wallowing and your goal is to move to acknowledging at some point, you know? Yeah. So I think it's hard to just have like a definitive line and say it's one or the other, but I would say look for patterns over time. You know, do you want to just talk about it because you want to talk about it and it makes you feel better, or people give you sympathy and you never want to take action and you never really want to get out of it? Like, are you really interested in helping yourself, or in growing, or in healing? Because I know it sounds silly, but like sometimes we're not. Sometimes we really want to hold on to the issue. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it takes a while to really be like open to comfort even, which sounds silly, but it's true, you know, because there are many times where we have a loss, and really more than wanting comfort and getting on and moving on past that loss is like, we just want our old life back. We just want to hang on to the issue or the person or whatever it was. We just don't want to let go of it. We're not ready yet. And you know what? That's okay. Like, it takes time to work through even that. But I think over time, if you're noticing it starting to be like a pattern for a very extended period of time, or you know, really affecting you in a negative way, where it's becoming your attitude, it is becoming more your identity and not an attribute. Those are some just sort of signals that maybe you're allowing your emotions to reign supreme over every aspect of your life. And, you know, just because we do feel things powerfully does not mean everything we feel is true in, like, I guess, an objective sense. I mean, we feel that it's true. Yeah, I think, you know, in general, most people who are at least moderately healthy don't want to be a victim of their life. You know, they want to overcome, they want to heal, they want to have good, deep relationships. And so I think by not fearing that acknowledgement and just allowing yourself to be there, it often creates space for you to really deal with whatever issues you might need to deal with. And you might even need professional help. I mean, there's no shame in that either. But whatever it is, it just kind of gives yourself the freedom to work through it and to then eventually become someone like a stronger in that area, or to have more healing in that area so that you can even help other people maybe. I mean, there's lots of things that can happen from that, but
I did, speaking of professional therapy,
Mhm.
I went through a season, and to some extent, can't wait to go back.
Yeah. I love it.
I went through a season where for like 4 to 5 years was going to my therapist for like every week.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes twice a week, where there was a good
Mm-hmm.
portion of that which is twice a week for an hour, and was so necessary because I cannot imagine the way that the rest of my relationships would have looked like
Yeah.
if I had relied on those relationships to be the strength that I need.
Yeah. And for me, I went to therapy for probably about a solid year, as you were saying, like a week or sometimes twice a week or something like that, for an extended period of time, for about a year, to go through things. And that was helpful for me as well, as realizing, like, having a third party give you just some perspective. And for me, one of the things that I had realized is a lot of people in my life were not great advisors, or were pretending they were friends, and maybe in their own way thought they were being friends. But the advice that they were giving was like sort of destructive to me healing. Like, it was like the opposite of what I wanted to be doing. And so whether intentionally or unintentionally, when I was constantly trying to help myself or trying to get advice from people in my group, the advice that I got, even though well-intentioned at times, was really unhealthy advice. And so having just the perspective of someone who is a trained professional counselor remind me, like, no, that's not a healthy perspective. Don't listen, like, don't discuss that with this person, because they're also having issues just like you know, like, this is a better trajectory to help you make better relationships, better decisions. And yeah, so I can definitely relate.
Therapists are the professionals who can trust to be that third party. And we can go to them and say, let me be weak. And you know that they will, like, at least for an hour.
Yeah.
You don't have to do, you don't have to do that. So within the rest of your life, how do you choose who you say to be weak to?
Gotcha. Great question. Because I do think the goal isn't to overshare with everyone or to make your boardroom a group therapy session or things like that. Definitely boundaries are great, and there is levels of appropriateness. And so I guess kind of looked to a couple different people in their research when I was writing that and kind of offering those suggestions. So one is Brené Brown, who, like, I mean, read everything she wrote. She's amazing. I can't speak highly of her enough. And other one is Dr. Henry Cloud. He has written the Boundaries books, and there's like lots of series of them, boundaries and dating, boundaries and, parenting, or like whatever it may be, whatever situation. There's some broad ones and very specific boundary ones that get into particular issues. So as a framework, if you're struggling with that, or if you're not sure, I just recommend just starting off reading a few of those, because they really kind of delve into that topic. But just sort of as a general rule of thumb, I don't know if I'm going to remember the quote exactly, but Brené Brown says, it's like, you share your story with people who've earned the right to hear it. And so for me, that's a key factor. I think, it depends on what you're doing. If you're in a professional setting and you're sharing something that, like, again, if you're sort of in self-help world or something similar to what we'd be discussing, maybe you would be using personal examples from your life. And so in that case, you would be sharing with an audience, but it would be, I would say, something that serves your work, something that you feel like you've received some perspective and healing on before you do that.
How do you do that within your personal life? Like, how does Brittany choose who to be weak with?
Great question. I think it depends. So in general, I'm a pretty open person.
It always depends. That's the magic answer.
I would say, like, I'm a pretty open person. So again, like, I tend to like the conversations that we don't usually want to have. Like, I'm the one who's pushing the conversation there. So I feel like
Me too.
Yeah. So in general, like, maybe I have a little bit less of a hurdle to doing that. But I think if there's a reason for me to tell it, like if there's someone who has been sharing with me or is being vulnerable with me, and I feel like I can share something vulnerable about myself that would be helpful to them, I often will. But if not, it's usually close friends or family that I know, like, who I have history with, who I've trusted, who have shown themselves trustworthy in small things. And also, this seems like maybe not the biggest issue, but I think it's huge, is that nobody in my inner circle, like I don't allow anyone in my inner circle who is not genuinely for me. And it's mutual. Like I am genuinely for them as well. It's not like a self-centered thing where it's like we only talk about me. I don't want to have to question whether someone in my circle really wants good for me, really wants to tell me the truth, really wants me to be happy and healthy. And so it takes time to get to know people. You don't always know that right off the bat. And so, I'll say too, if you're listening and you've made some poor choices in that decision, join the club. I have many times, and sometimes, and I probably will in the future, but just, people don't always show their true colors right away, and you can't go through life being a cynic and not ever being willing to share. And sometimes you will get burned, but you'll get through it and you'll make better choices or maybe spot some red flags earlier. But yeah, generally I know the people closest to me are people that I can trust who want me to be at my best. And so I share those kinds of things and those kinds of struggles with people that I know are not going to go gossip about me, who are not delighting in the fact that I'm having a bad day, but who want to acknowledge that and validate for me and help me in whatever way that they can. So I think that's what I try to do for other people and for myself as well.
Before we get back to the rest of the conversation, as I mentioned previously, I'm teaching this class called The Business of Bravery for private music teachers. And I actually created it because a couple of you guys came to me and asked for it. It's something that I've been asked a lot. How do you run your business? How do you run your teaching studio? How is it that you have so much time on your hand that you can do all this extra other stuff and still teach the lessons and be an awesome teacher? It's something that I would be happy to teach. So I put together a class. It starts on October 5th, but you don't have to be there for the live class to take it because you'll get recordings of the class emailed to you. It's all about how to know your stuff, know your money, know where to find your ideal students, how to take back your calendar and have more time to write songs, play shows, and do the things you want to do as a musician. It's also about how to automate your admin, so you're not spending all of your spare time texting students to reschedule lessons and all of that stuff. So you can go ahead to barenakedbravery.com to check it out. Just click on the link classes at the very top and you'll see what I'm talking about. And I would love to see you there. And if you're not interested in this class or you know of someone who is a music teacher, go ahead and share it with them. I'm sure they'd be interested to check it out. And if you're not a music teacher, but you want to take a class with me, go ahead and shoot me a message. What do you want to learn? What are you struggling with? I'd be happy to put together a class for you and some of your friends and make it really awesome. Okay, let's get back to the episode. What have been some of the ways that your personal inner circle has shown you strength when you've been weak?
Well, I think listening is so incredibly powerful. And because it can feel like it's a passive thing, even though it's not, we often diminish its importance. And one of my friends does this so well, where if I'm having a bad day or if I'm emotional about something, I can call and she'll just be like, ah. And I mean, she's like, I'm so sorry, and again, I'm so sorry, or I wish I could change that, or like, I'm so sorry you're going through that. Like, I wish I had something to say, but I think it's just allowing space for me to have that feeling without feeling like you're wrong, fix it, get better, have a plan. Overcome, attack, and there's a time and a place for it all. But I think especially when you're initially going through something or having that sort of initial shock of emotion, or it can be like very intense, and you just need someone to give you that space and not try to fix it. So I think that's where it's like that combination of both listening and listening without having to have the answer. Just being present with someone is really a gift. because, especially if there's something that's really traumatic or a big loss. Like, I mean, a lot of times we really don't have the power to change the situation or the circumstance for someone. Like, we can't really just make it better, even if we want to. And so it's freeing for the person who is there to offer support, because they no longer have to be the one with the answers. They no longer have to bear the responsibility of like fixing everyone or being the cheerleader of it's going to be okay and like, let's remain positive all the time. They can just allow you to be who you are and not be threatened by the fact that who you are is not always, like 100%
right
A game all the time, that you do have your own failures or struggles or shortcomings or just emotions even. So right. I think allowing space for that has been probably the best thing that people have done for me. It's just that empathy tie. There's also something that I say in the book, and it's sort of like some of the most healing, profound words that we can say to someone who's pain is like, me too. Just that empathy of being like, I might not know your specific situation, so not trying to project that like whatever you're going through is exactly the same and you know exactly how it's been. But being like, oh yeah, like I too have gone through that, or I too have experienced this emotion. Or if I were you and I was in this situation, I would also struggle with that. I would also be feeling this way. It just removes the judgment and the shame of feeling like, oh, it's just me. Like I'm not going to get through this and I'm the only one who's ever felt this way. And to have somebody really affirm you and be like, oh, absolutely not. We all feel that way sometimes, but not everybody tells people about it. And so I think I've had people affirm me in that and affirm, just saying again, that that's a courageous thing that you're doing. That's not a weak thing. It feels weak, but what we define culturally as weak is often a sign of courage and growth. So it's kind of helped me reframe how I think of those things when I share with people or how to comfort people.
Yeah. I'd really love to, if you'd be down for this, I'd really love to provide like a PDF of like 5 things that people can say, like fill in the blank things.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So one of those things, and just to reiterate, one of those things that you just said was, if I were in your shoes, I would feel that way too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Absolutely.
That is powerful, because I think a lot of people, when they hear that, or when they have somebody that's starting in on the, if I were in your shoes.
Yeah. Here's what I do. I'd make a plan. I'd have this thing. I'd never feel that way in the first place because I have power of positive thought and I would be over it already,
I think that's so American that we see the problem and we want to fix it right away.
I do. And it's honorable to some extent. Nobody likes to watch somebody in pain, particularly someone you love and care for, hurt without knowing when it's going to end. I don't like watching that. I can be very much like that. Even knowing what I know, I can want to do that for people I love. Because I'm like, no, not you, not pain. Like, we're going to snap right out of that. And it's offensive to a lot of people in our culture to not immediately have a plan for how you're going to get over whatever it is that's hurting you.
Right. So we've got me too. We've got, if I were in your shoes, I would struggle that way too.
Yeah.
Silence.
Mm-hmm.
Just listening. What else?
I think another one is, I've said before, but it's just like, I just wish I could do something, like, or if I was able to do something to fix it for you, know that I would. And since I can't, like, I'm just going to be with you. Like, I just want you to know that if there was anything to do, I would be the first person there to do it.
Yeah.
People just need to know, I think, that you care. I mean, there are some instances where the problem is something that you can change or you can make a difference. That's not really what we're talking about here. But if there's really something like circumstantially that has happened and you're not going to be able to make it unhappen, I think the best that we can just offer people, as Anne Lamott says, is our familiar, boring love.
Yes.
Like, that's all we can do, is just like let them know we care and that we're not going anywhere. Actually, that's one I would say too, is like, I'm not going anywhere.
Oh.
One common thing I have found that people do, because they think maybe they're helping, is that they remove themselves. Like when something happens, they're uncomfortable. They're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. They're afraid of being surrounded by intense emotions because maybe they're not someone who has dealt with their own intense emotion, and it brings up a lot of, fear and insecurity in them. And so they think like, I'll just like give you space. Like, I'm just going to like let you have your time. And sometimes like we do need that sometimes, like, but I feel like let that be the discretion of the person, not you. Like, don't make that choice on their behalf, because often in those kinds of situations, people feel extremely lonely or isolated. And especially if their life situation has changed in some way. So, well, I'll use just like a personal one. Like I've gone through lots of different seasons of being laid off and unemployment. And so I could be in a circle of friends when I am gainfully employed and doing well, and we all have this certain dynamic. But then when I lose my job, like the dynamic shifts. And so sometimes, that can, thankfully I've had a lot of people who've just embraced me in that, but it changes. It does. It changes the dynamic of the relationship. And then people are a little uncomfortable with that because this is now suddenly different. And well, you might not have the budget to do all the things that you used to do. You might not have the same, experience daily routine as these people do, or schedule, like all these different things. And it just kind of like sets
having somebody verbalize that they are not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Is so refreshing to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think it's that fear that then those people are going to be uncomfortable with your new normal. Yeah. And that they're going to leave and walk away because they don't know how to deal with it. And often does happen because of that exact reason, not really out of unkindness, but they just being uncomfortable and not being willing to be uncomfortable.
Oh my gosh. I have done it to other people.
Yeah.
And
me too.
Like you look back and you go like 6 months later, you go like, where did so-and-so go?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I hope.
And sometimes it's unintentional, like, in fact, often it's probably unintentional, it's not like you're like, I really don't care about you. I'm not going, you just, of course, you have your own stuff going on and you're trying to help. You're just not always aware of it. But I think those times, like, people are especially vulnerable in those situations and may be feeling especially different or isolated because they don't fit in anymore. Something in their life has drastically changed and their sense of self-worth or identity, like there was probably a lot of that going on in their own life. And so to have somebody say, like, I get that it's messy right now.
Yeah.
Like, I get that this is
I've personally also been on the other side of that coin where I go, well, whatever I'm going through right now is not fitting the people that are around me.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to find that comfort that you're mentioning. I need to find that comfort in a different crowd or from a different relationship or whatever. So
yeah. Sometimes it's illuminating, and just in that fact, like, you can just be like, wow, these people aren't really the people who would be here for me when I need them. And I didn't know because I didn't need them before, but now I do. And I'm looking to see, like, we can learn from those things. Like, I feel like it's not like every person that you meet is going to be on your team and they're
totally.
And nor can they be, even if they want to. Like, there's a limited amount of people that we can invest that heavily into. But yeah, for sure, especially just the people close to you, you just want to know, like you said, like, you want to know that you can go to them and that they're not going to be like, oh, really? I think we're going to have to rethink. You want to know that they're like, well, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of you being upset. You can be upset in my presence, and I'm strong enough to withstand that. I think that's what it is. It's just, strength in friendship in those times, I think, is often seen is in that just being like, I'm strong enough to handle whatever you're going through. Like, if you're upset about it, if you're emotional about it, if you're confused, if you don't have a plan, if you're frustrated, if you want to yell, I'm here, I get it to whatever extent that I can.
Yeah.
And you don't have to feel like you have to clean up to be around me.
Yeah. I think that's a good, like, what we have, we're up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 now. The 6th one would be, you don't have to be perfect.
Yeah. And in fact, you aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. Having somebody say, you don't have to blank for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You don't have to put on a show for me. You don't have to act as though like you're fine if you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so great. Well, so I think that is going to be a really cool thing to put on your show notes.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. That's a great idea.
Sure. Yeah, I'll make it into some cool little graphic, and we can put it on.
Yeah, and then it's like, again, a very like practical guide, because I think that's really where we struggle with when we're starting to understand it, and we're like, well, now what? So file a few of those away in your head. So when
So the 6 we have right now is first, silence. Second, if I were in your shoes, I would, and then struggle too. Third is me too. Fourth is I wish I could do something. Fifth is I'm not going anywhere. And sixth is you don't have to put on a show for me.
Yeah. I mean, would you feel, I would feel liberated and feel loved if
oh my gosh,
said that to me. And they have, thankfully.
Yeah.
And so it's a very different experience when somebody says one of those things to you versus, well, it's been a day already.
Right.
Onward and upward.
Exactly. Well, so now that you've written this great book, this super helpful, practical book for folks, what is next?
Who knows? Well, I sort of flip-flop in priorities. So like the book, I think there is potential that I will at some point write another book, but it is not in my immediate future. So what I've been working on since the book, so when I released the book, I wanted to also record and release the music single that went along with it, which I have done. And then since then, in terms of writing, I have been writing, but I've mostly been writing for a new album. So
that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited. So as you know, that takes time. I'm not quite sure, like in terms of dates when that's going to be out. So I've been writing for that, and also just doing some different guest posts for different blogs or things like this, podcasts, just getting out speaking, interviewing, just talking about the content of the book, or just, again, these are things that I'm passionate about because I think that they're true. And I think that we're all going to be, at some point, we're going to be the one needing help, or we're going to be the one who needs to help. Yes. And these are just very practical things that I feel are timeless to know, because it's not going to go away. So I think, I do kind of a mix of those things right now, but in terms of like writing and everything, this season is focused back on music more than writing another book, but who knows? I didn't really plan on writing the first one, so the second one could pop up somewhere.
We didn't even talk about that book part. We talked about the song part, but how did that come up? Like, you wrote a song.
Yeah.
So how made you decide to write a book?
At this point, the song, I had written the first verse and chorus, and I felt like, okay, I got enough of the bones and structure ready. Like, I'm going to finish this one. I know where it's going. And it was right around that time I had finished maybe the first verse and chorus of the song. I heard about self-publishing school through Twitter randomly from like another author that I think it was Jeff Goins. I'm not positive, but I just was interested. And so I guess like my subconscious wanted to write a book all along because I was like, ooh, I'm going to watch this. Like, I don't know why I
think there are some things there are some things especially in the songwriting world that, like, for instance, let's go back to that one song that I thought started with, that was going to be about this one thing and then turned out to be everything else. Yeah. Sometimes our subconscious knows, not just sometimes, all the time, our subconscious knows so much more than our cognitive mind does. Yeah.
And they're similar. I was maybe, this is probably like close to 10 years ago now. I did some blogging. And so, I had done a fair amount of like academic writing when I was in school. I had done like blogging, which was fun, but never with any kind of agenda. But I think writing, it was something I have like really been developing kind of my whole life. And so the way I try to describe it is sort of similar to like a sport. So I grew up playing basketball. Part of basketball, like, you run. Like, I never was like, hey, I want to go running all the time, but I wanted to get better at basketball. And part of that was like running and being in shape. And so I feel like writing for me has always been that component. Like, I never set out where I was like, I'm going to be a writer. I have to write. But it would be like, oh, I want to make an album. So I'm going to do this. And so like all these different sort of components that writing was a big part of, but it was never really the focus. And so when I was blogging, I had a handful of people saying, oh, you should write a book. Are you going to write a book? And my feedback to them was always like, well, I would write a book, but I can't think of what I'd write a book about. Like, I don't know what I have a book's worth of information to say. I feel like I can tie everything up pretty neatly at the end of a blog post, and I can't imagine having like a whole...
Or in a song.
Yeah, in a song. Yeah, then that's true, because like part of that mentality, it's like being very concise. You know, like every word matters when you only have so many in a song or 3 minutes in a song. Like you can't go on and on forever. So I think it was just sort of having that pattern of being like, oh, I couldn't possibly have more to say about it. So I watched this summit, and for those who haven't seen it, it's just several different authors or entrepreneurs who had written books talking about the process. And
I attended this last year's one too.
Yeah.
And this is for self-publishing school.
Yeah.
Which is how I know Brittany, because we're Facebook buddies through self-publishing school. Because while Brittany's book is out, mine is not yet.
But it will be soon. And this is going to be exciting.
But I'm in a very similar boat with you. Like, I started writing my book because there was stuff I wanted to say that deserved more than 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Even if it was on repeat, it deserved more than 3 minutes. So I imagine that's the same with you for this book.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then like when I realized that I think it was doable, and that, you know, like there really is, for me, I think like, again, it was just having a structure and being like, oh, I can actually write, like I can write a book. I just have to be intentional about how I approach it and how I schedule my time. But also once I finished a very, very, very rough outline, and I was like, nope, I really do have a book's worth of things to say.
Isn't that the coolest feeling?
Yeah, it was shocking. I was like, oh, I actually do think I can write a book about this, because like whenever you sit down to do anything, especially like something of that magnitude, you're like, oh, like you cannot really think about this huge volume of stuff, or you're never going to get started. You're just constantly going to overwhelm yourself. You really have to break it down into the small daily chunks. And I know that that's so obvious, but like I wasn't doing that. So when I actually was sort of forced to do that and look at everything, I was like, wow, this is manageable. I do have a lot to say. And it was really interesting. I learned why a lot of people want to talk to me in crisis. I was like, oh, that was interesting, because I've had that experience, or like, oh, I know this from this lesson, or I've learned this from something in school, or just seeing all the, like, where are all these things coming from in my life, seeing how like, oh no, I've had like this mix of weird circumstance and education that I can speak to this. So I felt like that was like a surprise to me too. I was like, oh yeah.
I think that's something that is very common across the writing disciplines, songwriting, book writing, poetry, otherwise. Like, we write to understand. Yeah. Like, we don't write to teach a lot of times. We write so that we can understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and I mean, I think understanding is really the root of connection, you know, ourselves and other people. When you're just asking questions and being curious, you learn more about yourself. You learn about other people. You learn like why people are the way they are, what makes them think the way that they do. And I just think it opens up so many avenues for conversation. And again, like you were saying, just deeper understanding of each other, and acceptance and love of one another, because you have like a fuller picture of who they actually are.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. So true. Moment of silence for that. So I am just so grateful that you were able to come and join us today.
Yeah, I'm glad you had me. It was so fun.
Oh my gosh. And I would love to have you back for any future projects that you've got going on. So just give us a shout out.
I'll find you, hunt you down.
Awesome. And let's keep in touch. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look forward to reading your book too in the near future as well.
Yay. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so beyond the Bare Naked Bravery adult coloring book, which is always available for you to download, have you checked it out yet? It's so awesome. Okay, anyways, Besides that, your brave takeaway from today's episode is a printable list of those 6 ways to respond with empathy that Brittany and I mentioned. On that Brave Takeaway download, Brittany has included a link to get another free download of one of her songs. We would love to hear what you think about it and hear what you thought about today's show, too. You can find Brittany and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and more. Just go ahead and tag us so we can cheer you on and see what you're up to. And that's our show. Thank you so much for listening. I am just floored by all of the wonderful things that you guys are saying out in the internet and the world. We have put all of the links for this show in the show notes for today's episode. Just go to barenakedbravery.com and you can check it out there. And if you have enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it for you, then please give us a review and rate the show in your iTunes desktop app or on your podcast app on your phone. Or you can just share it with a couple friends. If this episode specifically meant a lot to you or you think it would mean a lot to somebody else, go ahead and share it. That is totally okay to do. We highly encourage that. So, speaking of things that you are a part of, Bare Naked Bravery has an adult coloring book, and it features designs from 10 talented visual artists from all over the world, and you get to download it and draw and color on it while you listen to the next week's episode. Speaking of next week's episode is with Allison Sigmund, who is just such a wonderful lady. She wrote a book called Delivering Bad News to Good People. So I can't wait for you to hear that. Back to the coloring book, though. The coloring book, you can download it at barenakedbravery.com/color. And if you are interested in next week's episode, then make sure you subscribe to the show so that you automatically get updates on that. And if you're digging the music in today's episode, that's because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. To find out more about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, go ahead and visit barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. You'll get all of the information there. I am looking forward to being with you next week because we have some awesome things in store for you, like I mentioned. And until then, I have one message for you. It is this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.